Good afternoon, everyone. It is a real pleasure and honor to be here with you today. So in the next 30 minutes, I will give you a small glimpse into my field of work, related science, and its application in practice. I have been working in the field of sustainability for around 25 years now, both in theory and practice. And as a professor of sustainability science at Lund University, I'm happy to share with you that Lund has very recently been ranked the world's third best university in the field of sustainability. And Sweden as a whole is often seen as a forerunner when it comes to certain aspects of sustainability. But what is sustainability? It is a pretty big topic. It's not just climate change. In fact, sustainability work involves finding solutions to any kind of complex global challenges that threaten the existence of humanity and the planet. It thus focuses on existential threats and their inherent uncertainty. More specifically, sustainability work is then about developing solutions that allow us to meet current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is far from an abstract goal or something that is only relevant to sustainability scholars like me. On the contrary, whether we realize it or not, we address related questions in our daily lives, in both our personal and professional lives, either directly or indirectly. Sustainability work is guided by a broad vision, and I would like to invite you to close your eyes for a minute if it feels comfortable for you and imagine this vision with me. So sit back, consciously take a deep breath, and allow your body to become still. Now imagine what a sustainable world would look and feel like to you. Imagine a world without poverty or hunger, a world where everyone enjoys good health, well-being, quality education, and gender equality. Everyone has access to clean water, sanitation, and green energy. Adequate investments in industry, innovation, and infrastructure have reduced inequalities. Everyone lives in sustainable cities and communities where responsible consumption and production have led to meaningful climate action. Life below water is thriving, as does life on land. We all feel safe, knowing that our peace and justice is governed by care-driven organizations and partnerships that help us to stay committed and evolve and grow together. See yourself in this and how your everyday life and work help to sustain it. Then take another deep breath before you open your eyes. Did you recognize this vision? What we just imagined together are the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals that world leaders adopted in 2015 and that we committed to reach by 2030. It is a beautiful vision, one that is truly worth working towards. And I believe that it is directly linked to many aspects of your own work and life. But unfortunately, we know that our reality looks different. The path that our societies are following remain deeply unsustainable. It is clear that our dominant sustainability approaches have not catalyzed the necessary change. And this is despite the prominence of sustainability as a concept and the associated goals and targets that have been set since the 1980s. One reason for this situation is that the vast majority of sustainability work has so far mainly focused on the external world, ecosystems, wider socioeconomic structures, and technology. In fact, sustainability challenges like climate change are generally framed as external threats or crises, and we therefore try to address them with external, primarily technical measures. And this is simply because the way we define problems automatically determines our responses to them. A second aspect of reality has thus been vastly neglected: our inner lives and our inner capacities. As a result, while the professional and technological skills that we need to face today's crisis have increased exponentially, our ability to use them wisely has not. But what is now changing the narrative is that we are increasingly understanding that the threats and the crises we face are ultimately a reflection of an inner human crisis. But what does this mean? And how did we get there? It means that we are currently living in very interesting times. On the one hand, many of us are probably living the utopia of our grandparents. We should not forget and be grateful for all the positive aspects of our lives, how fortunate we are. Many of us are enjoying a privileged life with modern healthcare, democracy, and human rights. At the same time, this progress has a downside. You could call it an unintended side effect. We are in the midst of a global polycrisis. We are facing an ecological catastrophe, climate change, biodiversity loss, a worldwide mental health crisis, poverty, war, and political turmoil. Imagine this: in Europe, every fifth animal species is currently in danger of extinction. And apparently, we humans have never been so anxious. This situation relates, amongst other things, to the fact that we are living in an increasingly complex, highly interdependent, and fast-paced world where threats in one area quickly escalate into global threats or challenges. And at the same time, we are experiencing exponential technological development, such as the internet and social media, that has multiple impacts. The manipulation of our attention and polarization are only two examples. The result is what we call a VUCA world, and VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It describes the state of constant, unpredictable change, which is now the norm in certain industries and aspects of life. And this situation also affects our personal lives, forcing us to constantly rush and to reorient or reinvent ourselves several times during our lifetime. It is very easy to feel overwhelmed. But if we look deeper, we can identify some common root causes that underlie the many threats and the inherent uncertainty that we face today. We increasingly understand that these threats are, in fact, a reflection of an inner human crisis. They result from a kind of alienation, which is an inherent element of modern life. This alienation stems from our modern society's narrative or paradigm of separation, which assumes that our thinking mind is separate from our feelings and bodily emotions. that we are all separate from each other, that some humans are superior to others, and that we humans are separate and superior to the rest of the natural world. This alienation has become an inherent part of our mindsets, our culture, and the larger societal, institutional, and political structures that many of us have grown up with. And this affects our daily lives. So the rules of the game of modern society mean that we all fall into the trap of optimizing for self-interest and short-sightedness. I call it a trap because if I decide to not follow certain rules, for instance, if I'm a business owner and decide not to engage in an unsustainable practice for profit, someone else will. So what is the point? This situation is reflected in our daily lives, yours and mine, where we find ourselves relentlessly and increasingly exploiting and exhausting ourselves, others, and the planet. We call this crisis, which relates to our inner lives, a crisis of separation. So sustainability is thus about our inner rather than our outer world. And an individual hero won't get us out of this. What we need is collective action and the creation of conditions that enable emerging collective action that address the root causes of the problem. Gustav Speth, former chair of the United Nations Development Group, expressed the situation as follows. I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. In other words, what we can see, the crises that define our world today are just like the tip of the iceberg, the part that we can see. But around 90% is hidden beneath the surface. And this 90% represents our underlying patterns of behavior and associated structures, and importantly, our individual and collective mindsets that are ultimately responsible for creating the crisis that we see today. Based on this understanding, the key question becomes, how can we shift from a situation where we are relentlessly and increasingly exhausting and exploiting ourselves, others, and the planet towards a more caring and thus sustainable society? Answering this requires us to ask and address existential questions, questions about our identity, and how we relate and are connected to ourselves, others, and the world. In turn, we must ask how we can unlock our inner potential to care and commit to effecting change for a better life, to ultimately increase individual, collective, and planetary well-being. These are all very difficult questions. And over the past decade, I, along with other scholars, have increasingly engaged with these questions. And our work has led to the emergence of a new field of study. This new field has different names because it's still very new, such as inner transformation for sustainability or existential sustainability. It focuses on fostering new narratives and pathways that can better address the root causes of today's polycrisis. And with this, I mean new narratives and pathways that are rooted in a deep understanding of the linkages between our mind and today's sustainability crisis. This emerging scientific field provides new knowledge on how we can move from the current vicious cycle of deteriorating personal and planetary well-being that is based on our alienation from self, others, and nature, and which is here illustrated on the bottom of the figure, to a virtuous cycle of personal and planetary well-being and flourishing, which is illustrated here at the top of the figure. Our work in this area also sheds light on the inner qualities and capacities needed to support this change, so to shift from a vicious to a virtuous cycle. In the context of sustainability science, these capacities and the way they influence sustainability outcomes have been identified in the so-called inner-outer transformation model, which you see on this slide. It's a simplified version of it. And this model identifies 5 clusters of so-called transformative capacities and explains how they affect our relationships to ourselves, others, and the world around us, which are expressed in our beliefs, values, and worldviews, and how this ultimately influences our choices and how we act in ways that can support transformation through the regeneration of human and planetary well-being. And the model also indicates the measures and activities that are needed to support transformative capacities. Our scholarly work has also been put into practice to some extent. So one example is the development and implementation of the so-called Inner Development Goals, the IDGs, which were initiated by a Swedish group of scholars and practitioners, but is now a worldwide movement. I have been a senior scientific advisor of the Inner Development Goals from the very beginning, and Luxus, my organization, is one of the founding organizations of the initiative. The Inner Development Goals framework is not a scientific, but similar to the SDGs, a communication tool that aims to advocate for the role of inner transformative capacities for sustainability. It has already been adopted worldwide by many different companies, governmental agencies, educational bodies, faith-based organizations, and even a country, which is Costa Rica. The framework consists of 23 capacities that are clustered under the headings of being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting, and which are similar to the 5 clusters of the inner-outer transformation model that I presented before. Today, I would like to highlight 3 of these transformative capacities that have been identified as crucial for accelerating sustainability in our scientific work. These are mindfulness, self-awareness, presence, compassion, and active hope. And later, I will also refer to the aspect of contemplation to support these. So, if we trace the roots of today's sustainability crisis back to a culturally entrenched narrative of separation, as I explained before, we can clearly see the potential role of mindfulness, compassion, and hope, because nurturing mindfulness and compassion involves exploring how we relate to ourselves, others, and the world at large in reflective, meaningful, and responsible ways. And this exploration nurtures and gives rise to what I call active hope, or a mature expression of hope. And I see this as the aspiration to manifest our full potential, trusting that it is possible, and dedicating energy to serving this unfolding towards individual, collective, and planetary well-being. But just talking about and nurturing certain inner capacities, such as compassion, is unfortunately not enough. Transformation can only be achieved if we systematically support inner transformation for sustainability across all levels, the individual, the collective, and the system level, and in ways that we touch our mind and our hearts. Measures at individual and collective levels involve activities that are designed to help us to tap into our potential, uncover our individual thinking, understand how we have internalized cultural messages of separation, superiority, and instrumentalization, and encourage us to develop inner transformative capacities and create new ways of being, thinking, and acting in the world. This can take the form of related education in schools and universities, capacity development for leaders and decision makers, and the creation of related networks, exhibitions, or festivals to create a culture of growth and nourish fields of change. Measures at the system level aim to systematically mainstream the consideration of transformative capacities and inner transformation into existing institutional and political systems. So this involves their institutionalization, namely their acknowledgement and integration into our organizational cultures, our working structures, our financial mechanisms, our policies and regulations, our operational tools and communication, basically everything, to help us escape collectively the traps I mentioned earlier. A concrete example would be that the development and use of technology is guided by intrinsic universal capacities and values like compassion as opposed to GDP. Another example would be to change communication structures and mechanisms by moving away from the common meta messages that support feelings of powerlessness and anxiety in our societies towards communicating a new theory of change that supports agency and hope. And here in Sweden, organizations like IKEA and Stena have, for instance, signed up to the inner development goals and are trying to work towards the integration of them in their operations. Crucially, from an ethical standpoint, the work across the presented three scales or levels, the individual, the collective, and the system level, is not about trying to fix or change other people's beliefs, values, or worldviews, because this understanding would turn people into objects to be changed, rather than seeing them as change makers or as agents of change. It would also reinforce the polarizing, dualistic, blaming, fix it and fix others mentality that underlies current unsustainable paradigms. Instead, from a sustainability perspective, we need to create measures and spaces and conditions within our organizations that can nurture a culture of inner development, mutual support, and engagement from a place of shared universal values and a deeply rooted sense of interconnection. And this will ultimately rattle unsustainable norms, cultures, and power structures. And contemplative practices can play an important role in this context, such as meditation, nature and art-based approaches, creative visioning, or storytelling. Similar to Gustav Speth, my own story was that my many years of working in sustainability made me more and more aware of the fact that we are neglecting an important part of the story. And I was wondering, why is there no place for asking the essential fundamental questions of life? If sustainability is about the challenges that threaten the future of humanity and the planet, as I explained in the very beginning of my presentation, why is there no space for asking existential questions about us, about our identity. So in search of finding different solutions, 10 years ago, I created the Contemplative Sustainable Futures program and embarked on a new journey in my life to look more deeply into the link between human inner development, culture, and system change. And the first responses were blunt. This would be a career-ending move. And only later did I understand that these negative responses in form of resistance, ridicule, or incomprehension lay at the very foundation of the question I was asking, because I was challenging the very foundation people's lives and our institutions are built upon. And challenging current approaches to nurture a new normal that is a more sustainable narrative can feel threatening to people who want to preserve the status quo. I have written a poem about my journey that led me to create the Contemplative Sustainable Futures program, which I would like to share with you now in form of a short contemplation. So I invite you to close your eyes once more if it feels comfortable and allow your body to become still while you listen with your mind and heart as I read this poem to you. It is titled, It's One Story. As a child, I grew up with strong feelings, a deep sense of who I am and what is important in life. I felt one with the world. Talking to the wind in autumn, dancing with snowflakes in winter, listening to flowering in spring, and jumping with grasshoppers in summer, living and caring were one. As I became older, culture took over. The stories I heard began to color my life. I went to school. I learned that adults and experts know, not children. I learned that knowledge is external, not internal. Kicked out of the world of wonders and wisdom, I started filling my brain with knowledge to find a new place in the world. I went through academia, learned that the truth is complicated, learned to express myself in complicated ways. Over time, I ceased to understand myself, hiding under layers and layers of othering to feel protected. At one point, my heart and body became rebellious. My voice refused to repeat others' stories. My thoughts refused to ignore my feelings. Feelings of partiality, imperfection, of separation. I lost my voice. Then I saw the separation in the world, how relentlessly we exhaust ourselves, others, and the planet around us, how we seek comfort in material distractions. Consumerism, injustice, climate change. It's me. It's us. It's one story. Searching for a new voice is scary, and a strong headwind rolls out there. But if you understand my silence, you may understand my words. Delving into stillness, you might hear my call. So if you feel ready, please open your eyes again. So yes, despite the strong headwind that sometimes rolls out there, I continued setting up the Contemplative Sustainable Futures program. And over the past 10 years, it has given me the opportunity to look and engage in outer transformation in different ways, in research, education, and practice. And at Lund University, we work today with integrating inner transformation across different disciplines, departments, and levels. So first, we integrate transformative capacities into various undergraduate and postgraduate courses. And some examples are the Sustainability and Inner Transformation course, and the Living the Sustainability Idea track, both from different departments. Second, we also offer regular seminars to staff and students that relate to their inner development goals, such as workshops on professional skills development for a sustainable future, where the organizers draw much of their inspiration from the IDG toolkit. Third, IDGs are included in some of our student career services, for instance, at the School of Economics and Management. Fourth, several of the university's faculties are also engaged in research projects that explore how inner transformative capacities can be best integrated into education at all levels. And we are also just joining network of universities for inner development for students, focused on students and education. Fifth, Lund University is financing various strategic collaborations that are related to linking inner and outer transformation for sustainability. And one example is the Existential Resilience Collaboration Initiative, which brings together a broad range of actors from within and beyond academia to support individual, collective, and planetary well-being. And the particular context is education and health. And then we also collaborate closely with the new Lund Science Center, which will be built up over the coming years, and then to integrate during that process internal, external transformation in all their operations. And seventh and finally, there are other initiatives at the administration policy levels. Here, the focus is on discussions about how to integrate transformative capacities and develop new policies to improve the working environment of staff. So each year, there are new initiatives, but we still have a long way to go before we will achieve any systematic integration or institutionalization of inner dimensions of sustainability. Beyond Lund University, our work, research, and the models that I presented before have been taken up by many academic institutions and nonprofit organizations that offer diverse training programs in the field. And the evaluations of such courses have in turn led to the development of the so-called education tree for inner-outer transformation, which you can see here. So it incorporates the theories and the model that I presented previously, and it provides concrete guidance for designing courses that aim to accelerate sustainability through linking inner and outer transformation. It illustrates the 4 essential pieces that courses of this kind should include. And these 4 pieces relate to how we see the world, how we get to know, how we engage, and how we ensure quality education to foster deep understanding and transformation for action taking. And in this context, the model also highlights the foundational role of contemplative practices. It's part of the second element, and how such practices can evolve, be adapted or expanded for the context of sustainability to be geared to the changes that we need to see collectively. So if you plan to implement any kind of courses or capacity development for sustainability, be sure to check it out. And our work has also been taken up by important policy stakeholders such as the IPCC or the IPBES and UNDP and many other international, regional, and national organizations. And here you can see some related policy documents which we wrote in cooperation with the UNDP, the Mindfulness Initiative, the Inner Green Deal, and the Club of Rome. And if you want to access these reports or read more about the science and the mentioned models, you can find them under this link here on the bottom, and the webpage will soon also be updated within the next week. So to sum up, this is my last slide. The field of inner transformation for sustainability invites us to see and respond to the immediate needs that exist, and at the same time also address the inner root causes that underlie today's polycrisis. And it reminds us about the importance to nurture inner transformative capacities, not only individually, but collectively, and integrate and anchor them into our education, our culture, and our institutional and political structures. Thank you.